Good evening, I'm Amirul Aiman, and these are our top stories for tonight. China warns that US arms sales to Taiwan are increasing the risk of war, and Beijing accuses Washington of attempting to undermine improving ties between China and India. All that and more coming up on AWANI International. China has criticized the latest US weapons deal with Taiwan on Thursday, saying the sale was speeding up the threat of war in the Strait. This comes after the United States announced a $11.1 billion in arms sales to Taiwan, the biggest ever US weapons package for the democratically governed island. Chinese Defense Ministry spokesperson Zhang Xiaogang said Washington should stop what he called provocations and correct its wrong actions. The ministry on Friday said its military would step up training and take forceful measures to safeguard the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity in response to the deal. The package comes as Beijing ramps up military and political pressure on Taiwan, which China considers its own territory. While Washington has formal diplomatic relations with Beijing, it maintains unofficial ties with Taiwan and remains the island's most important arms supplier. Under US law, Washington is required to provide Taiwan with the means to defend itself, a long-standing source of friction with China. Taiwan, meanwhile, is significantly increasing its defense spending, announcing a $40 billion supplementary defense budget and aiming to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP by 2030 to counter growing threats from China. Japan is urging Washington to reinforce its commitment to Taiwan as Tokyo adopts increasingly firm rhetoric on cross-strait tensions, according to researcher Robert Wenzel. Wenzel, a research fellow at the Central European Institute of Asian Studies, says the shift is aimed primarily at encouraging the United States to take a more active role in maintaining stability in the Taiwan Strait.
And it also sends a message to Washington that, okay, we are willing to become a more assertive partner, more assertive ally, and we will take our share of responsibility for shaping security environment in our region, right? So, and also maybe given the sort of transactional relation between Trump's administration and Taiwan, maybe Senator Takaichi is also trying to shape U.S. perception about importance of Taiwan and really trying to maybe commit them more. And also give
Takaichi's remarks on Taiwan have previously triggered a diplomatic backlash from Beijing, adding to already strained China-Japan relations. China has repeatedly demanded that she retract comments suggesting a Taiwan conflict could be an existential threat to Japan that might justify a military response, arguing that such views breach the One China principle. Wenzel said Japan is likely to adopt a more autonomous tone in foreign and security policy under the right-wing nationalist leader Takaichi, while remaining firmly anchored within the US-led alliance.
think that we will see maybe more autonomous tone in Japan's foreign security policy, and maybe more agency in Japan's role within this alliance, which on the other hand I think will be much appreciated in the US, right? Because or it should be appreciated in the US because that's what they wanted, right? The US want their allies to take over more responsibility and also like more of the of the costs for their own defense, right? The same as in Europe.
China accuses the United States of misrepresenting its defense policy and attempting to obstruct improving relations between China and India. Speaking on Thursday, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian says Beijing views its relationship with India from a strategic and long-term perspective. Lin added that China firmly opposes any third country making assessment or comments on the China-India border dispute, saying it should be resolved exclusively through dialogue between the two nations. His remarks came in response to questions about whether China might use easing border tensions as a way to limit the strengthening of ties between the US and India. Earlier, the Pentagon said in a report that China was likely seeking to reduce border tensions to stabilize regional relations and prevent closer cooperation between Washington and New Delhi. That's the headline for tonight. More news coming up shortly after the break. Welcome back. Britain, Canada, Germany, and several other countries condemned Israel's approval of 19 new settlements in the occupied West Bank, saying the move breaches international law. In a joint response, they warned the decision could increase instability in the region.
They also called on Israel to reverse both the latest approvals and its wider settlement expansion. They said the move forms part of an intensified settlement policy in the West Bank and said such unilateral actions violate international law. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar rejected the criticism on Wednesday, saying the decision was taken in response to Israel's security concerns and the threats it faces.
The US Justice Department says more than 1 million additional documents linked to Jeffrey Epstein have been discovered and are now under review. The department says it will need several more weeks to organize and redact the newly uncovered material before it can be released publicly.
Officials added that lawyers are reviewing the files on an ongoing basis to meet legal requirements. But the sheer volume of material means the process will take longer than initially expected. The Justice Department began releasing records from the Epstein investigation last week. Last month, Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which was signed into law by President Donald Trump. The legislation requires the full release of related documents by the 19th of December.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin praises what he describes as an invisible friendship with North Korea in a New Year letter to leader Kim Jong-un, according to North Korean state media reports. The message received in Pyongyang last week commends North Korean soldiers supporting Russia's war in Ukraine.
Putin said their involvement reflected what he called a militant fraternity between the two nations. South Korean and Western intelligence agencies estimate that North Korea sent more than 10,000 soldiers to Russia in 2024, primarily to the Kursk region, alongside shipments of weapons and ammunition. Putin said the deployment of soldiers from the Korean People's Army, followed by the work of North Korean engineers in Russia, demonstrated the enduring strength of bilateral ties. He added that closer relations between Moscow and Pyongyang would contribute to what he described as a fairer, multipolar world order through expanded political and security cooperation.
The White House has ordered US military forces to focus almost exclusively on enforcing a quarantine of Venezuelan oil, signaling a shift toward economic pressure rather than direct military action against Caracas. The move comes as Washington seeks to intensify sanctions on the Maduro government without escalating into open conflict. A US official told Reuters that the administration's priority for at least the next 2 months is to enforce sanctions by interdicting Venezuelan oil shipments, saying military options remain available but are not the current focus. The official said the strategy is aimed at triggering severe economic pressure, with the belief that by late January, Venezuela could face an economic crisis unless it makes significant concessions to Washington. The U.S. Coast Guard has already seized 2 tankers carrying Venezuelan crude this month and is preparing for a third interception of a sanctioned vessel known as Bella 1, according to Reuters. President Donald Trump has accused Venezuela of flooding the United States with drugs, and his administration has carried out repeated strikes on boats it claims were linked to narcotics trafficking, operation criticized by several countries as extrajudicial. Bangladesh Nationalist Party acting chairman Tariq Rahman has returned to the country after nearly 17 years in exile. His return comes as the BNP regains momentum ahead of landmark general elections following the 2024 ouster of longtime leader Sheikh Hasina.
Rahman is widely seen as the frontrunner for Prime Minister in the general election scheduled for February. He is expected to take over the party leadership from his ailing mother, former Prime Minister Khalida Zia, who is 80 years old. Rahman, who has lived in London since 2008, had been unable to return for years, while facing multiple criminal cases in Bangladesh. He was previously convicted in absentia on charges including money laundering and in a case linked to an alleged plot to assassinate Sheikh Hasina. The rulings were overturned after her ouster last year in a student-led uprising, clearing the way for his return.
World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says 2025 has delivered major global health gains, but warns funding cuts and humanitarian crises now threaten that progress. Tedros said the adoption of the WHO pandemic agreement was the year's biggest achievement, calling it a powerful example of multilateral cooperation.
He added that 13 countries were validated for eliminating diseases, while the WHO also issued guidance on medical innovations, including lenacapavir for HIV prevention and GLP-1 treatments for obesity. The agency also responded to 48 emergencies across 79 countries and territories, including Gaza, Sudan, and Ukraine. However, Tedros warned that aid cuts could undo decades of progress, with early estimates suggesting child mortality could rise for the first time this century. Tedros said budget reductions have also forced the WHO to cut its workforce, but insisted that the agency remain relevant to global health.
That concludes AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the strategies and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more updates, visit international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. I'm Amirul Aiman. Thank you for watching. Merry Christmas and good night.
Bully di sekolah, isu